Welcome to My Grandpa's Train. Today I am going to be working on the Texas Special by Lionel HO scale. And the primary thing I'm going to do today is get the diesel locomotive taken apart, cleaned, lubricated, and put new rubber bands inside because it needs them. And it also needs new couplers. Front and back are both missing. Alright, let's get inside the locomotive. And to do that, it's very simple. There's two plastic clips, one on each side. You spread it apart, just like an Athearn, and the shell comes right off. This shell is in really good shape. I don't know how well you can tell on camera, but the paint is a nice bright red color. There's no fading. There's hardly any scratches that I can see. A little bit of dirt on this side. Just a little dirt here and there. And that is excellent. I'm glad it's well preserved. And here's our frame and motor. Now I'll have to dig into this a little bit and see how I'm going to have to get the, I think I'm going to end up taking this all the way apart down to the worm gears. And alright, I've got my parts bin and let's tear into this. I want to be careful with this light bulb to try to preserve it if I can. I don't know how common this type of light bulb is, but the only other one I have like it is burned out, so. Just for the comparison, I wanted to show you before I take this any further apart. You can see all the hair and rubber goo that's built up on these trucks. And it's very difficult to turn the drive shaft because it's full of rubber. Rubber and dried grease, and this one is chock full of hair. Have to add some ew. Look at that, how gross. Ew. Oh, it's all nasty and gooey. Alright, enough of that. Alright. All the parts have been cleaned in the ultrasonic cleaner, and there's just a little bit of rubber band goo left on the truck, so I'm going to use Goo Gone. This is perfect for removing rubber band residue, so I'm just going to apply this to a paper towel and wipe it off. Alright, I just spent quite a while cleaning up the wheels on this engine, and they were pretty filthy. The weird thing about this engine was that this truck, the wheels they cleaned up pretty good. It looks like the normal carbon buildup and stuff, and this one, however, I'm going to put back in the ultrasonic cleaner because this one, as I was cleaning and polishing, I was using a nylon wire wheel actually. Because it was caked on so bad, and this one has metal flakes coming off of it. I'm not sure if that is perhaps the coating on the wheels is starting to disintegrate, but anyways, I am going to stick this back in the ultrasonic cleaner for another round. The other truck is fine, it doesn't seem to be having that issue, but this one needs a little bit more time in the ultrasonic. While that is being cleaned, I'm going to put together everything else that I'm able to. So the front truck and then the motor will go back inside the frame. So the next thing, I've got these rubber band drive belts replacements, and let's see how many I have left in this pack. Looks like exactly 2. So that worked out just perfect. I believe I got these off of eBay, but this is the anyway. All right. Okay, the ultrasonic's done. I'll be right back. All right, actually getting this put back together isn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be. These little snaps just pop right back in place. Of course, now that the camera's on, it's not going to go as smoothly as the first one. There we go. All right, because this is an entirely plastic drive, I'm not going to put any grease on it. I'm just going to use oil, and I'll probably oil it once it's all put back together. Okay, so now I can get the front. Well, so here's where this sits at the moment. So while the other truck is drying, it's all cleaned off again. You need to get it air dry so there's no extra liquids in this. And I got the front truck put back together. I got the belt put on. One thing to note is those belts are made for the Athearn locomotives, and they're a little bit small, I would say, for this. Really should have just a slightly larger belt. Another thing I noticed is that these little brass screws hold the trucks in place, and this one, I think it's actually the bracket on the truck is stripped just a little bit, so I can't tighten it down too much. But it does run, and I'll show you that real quick here. It definitely doesn't run good. I'm surprised it runs that good at all. Well, this motor might get a new magnet in the future, we'll see. But right now it's running just fine as is. So I'm going to oil up the front truck and then start putting the rear one together. So now I have both the front and rear trucks put back together. The rear one actually went back a little bit cleaner, although it took a little longer to do. Now it's all clean and put back together. This definitely will not have much as far as speed control. It'll start fast and it doesn't go super fast. So this will definitely give it a very toy-like feel when I'm running it on the tracks, as opposed to much more modern realistic types. This is definitely built as a toy train. Okay, so the next thing to do is to reinstall or install the replacement front and rear couplers. So I will go ahead and do that now. Well, my extra coupler stash arrived, and I found a couple that I was able to modify to make work. I couldn't find an exact matching Lionel coupler, which looks like this, just like the broken one. And so I had to dig around through the collection and find some that resembled this but had a thick enough shank here that I could modify it just a little bit. What I had to do is actually drill this hole out so that it would fit over the pin inside this coupler mount, because you would think you could just drop in an old-fashioned Athearn coupler, which looks like this, but because the Athearn couplers are not offset and the Lionel couplers are offset where the top of it is higher than the shank, otherwise it'll sit low. And that one sits low as it is. So I'm going to attempt to install this one. This is kind of a real pain because these couplers are held in with these metal clips, and you have to bend them pretty severely to get it apart. And then when you put it back together, they don't fit quite nice as tightly as they did when they were assembled, probably with a crimper at the factory. So this, I used the 17/64 drill bit on this coupler, and it worked pretty good. It wasn't too much that it broke the coupler, which then I'd be kind of done at that point. But it allows it to fit nicely over that pin. All right, so what I need to do is to get this to be reshaped and clamp back over the mount, this thing here. So getting that to go on isn't too bad. Then I have to hold this like this. I think I'm going to take my large pliers just to get the sides to flatten out a little bit. Yeah, that actually straightened out pretty good. Now, once I did that, the bottom of the clip has a bow in it, so I'm going to take a small flat blade screwdriver and flatten that back down. I suppose a small pliers would work just as well. In fact, maybe this one might work better because it's got a nice flat surface to it. But be careful with that. All right, so it's basically back on now. The last thing I'm going to do to it is to get the clips to seat properly in this little slot here. I'm assuming they would have done this with a special crimper at the factory, but what I'm going to do is just bend it straight with the small plier or small screwdriver, and then take a needle nose and press the top back down so it's a nice square and it's not loose around it. We'll do this side. So if you ever need to replace couplers on a Lionel diesel locomotive, you are aware of it's not a simple task as easy as some of the newer or different types of locomotives. And I'll just show you as an example. So it still sits on there kind of loose, although I think that'll be just fine. It isn't going to fall off. But compared to the old ones, this is the old one, and it's got just a tiny amount of play in it, but not nearly as loose as the ones that I replaced. Well, this one's got just a little bit of wiggle in it too, so maybe that's by design, but by replacing it, it definitely has a lot more play in it. So, yeah. And actually, so now that I have been able to do that, I would like to probably replace the couplers on this unit, and I'll probably turn this other one into a dummy unit so that I can have an A-B set. Well, that concludes this rebuild process. I want to take this over to the tracks. We'll give it a test run and then pull some Lionel freight cars with it. We'll pull its original set minus the one car that set was missing, plus I'll add on all of the Lionel cars that I have. So replacing the shell is quite simple. Pops back on just like that. There's two clips, one on each side, and we're ready to take it to the track. Let's see this thing roar.